100 lifeguards were having a pool party to celebrate one summer without any drownings. You will never guess how one guest died. It was August 1985 in New Orleans. The Recreation Department in New Orleans decided to throw a pool party to celebrate a summer without any drownings. This was actually the first summer in memory that this had happened. There was around 200 people in attendance at the party, and there were 4 lifeguards on duty that day. However, one guest's untimely death would become horrifically ironic. The guests had a great time at the party, but as soon as everybody started to disperse and the lifeguards started to clean out the pool, they discovered something horrific. A man named Jerome Moody was fully clothed, submerged at the bottom of the deep end. They desperately tried to resuscitate him, but it was too late. It's believed that during the course of the party, he'd ended up slipping fully clothed into the pool. No one witnessed it, and therefore nobody had managed to save him.
The person you just saw in that video was former elected official and pedophile Stacey Marie Lofton. Stacey was the first openly transgender person elected to a state legislature anywhere in the United States. And people at the time in New Hampshire who elected Stacey thought that this was extremely radical. They were proud that they were inclusive and that they were giving power to an underrepresented population. However, Stacey would go on to do some terrible things. Because you see, in 2023, Stacey would be arrested and charged with possession of CP or CSAM. I still don't know the exact connection, but Stacey was arrested as well as this woman, a 38-year-old woman named Lindsay Groves. Now, Lindsay worked at a place called Creative Minds Early Learning Center in Massachusetts, where she worked closely with children. And apparently, Lindsay would use the bathroom breaks during the children's school day to take photographs of them. Photographs of them in compromising positions with no clothing on. Lindsay would then send these photos to the person she was in a relationship with, and I guess somehow some of those photos ended up in Stacey's possession. Now, I don't know what happened to Stacey after all of this, but I do know that it was reported that Stacey went to a prison for men. And yeah, this is just some really disturbing stuff. If you want to listen to more true crime stories, listen to the podcast that I co-host with my wife Courtney, Murder in America. It's available now on all streaming platforms.
The man behind me, his name is Christopher Hope, and he's been sentenced for feeding his diabetic daughter Mountain Dew, leading to her death. He'll spend a minimum of 7 years in prison. Now, they did charge him with involuntary manslaughter, but it still does not defeat the purpose that, come on, dude. If your daughter's diabetic, why don't you not give her Mountain Dew? The girl was also only 4 years old and diabetic. That is insane. If this story sounds familiar, it's because it is. Her mother, Tamara Banks, was recently arrested for, being a role in this. I also made a video on her a few weeks back, but now it's his turn. The little girl was found unresponsive inside of the home in January of 2022. She was transported to a hospital in Cincinnati where she was pronounced dead when she got there. She was put on life support, but they pulled the plug 2 days later because she was kind of gone. The judge and all the investigators argued the girl's health was so poor because she didn't visit any doctor since she was born that resulted in her death. On top of them feeding her Mountain Dew. They were mixing formula and Mountain Dew for a 4-year-old. This led to all of her teeth rotting out. She died from ketoacidosis. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, these videos are for informational purposes only.
This woman cut her cheating husband's off twice. It was 2015 in Shangqiu, China. Fan Lung was a father of 5. The 32-year-old was married to his wife, 30-year-old Feng Lung. However, he was secretly messaging another woman. This was 21-year-old Zhang Heng. Bizarrely, he used his wife's phone to do this. On one occasion, though, he forgot to log out of his account when he gave his wife the phone back. This enabled her to see an explicit message that he'd sent to the other woman. When she saw this, she flew into a rage. She burst into the bedroom where he lay sleeping and cut his penis off with scissors. He was rushed to hospital where surgeons managed to perform surgery to reattach his organ. However, the wife then snuck into the hospital room and cut it off again. After hacking it off a second time, she threw it out of the window. Shocking images showed him naked running outside chasing his wife. Blood was running down his leg as he struck her. Medical staff raced outside. However, doctors unfortunately couldn't find his missing body part this time. It was thought that maybe a wild animal had taken it. His 21-year-old lover actually came to visit him in the hospital. Despite him losing the organ, she stated that she planned to marry him as soon as possible.
So the man behind me decided to run over a church security guard and kill him with his truck. Behind me is Mark Ward, and he will now spend the rest of his life in prison for committing this heinous act. The man that he ran over was a 61-year-old veteran. This happened in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the judge sentenced him to life on June 10th. The killing happened back in 2022. The victim's name was Daniel Bourne, and this happened outside of the Cavalry Church. The security guard went to go check on the truck. He thought it was suspicious, and that's when Ward ran him over. Not once, but twice. The security guard pulled out that bang and started shooting. It hit the radiator, and it kind of guided the truck's trail, and it kind of showed investigators where the truck was going. It also showed him backing up and then going in again to try to hit him. Bourne then tried to get out his phone to record the whole incident, try to get the plates. In the video, you can hear him heavy breathing because he's in a lot of pain. He literally just got hit by a truck. And then, as we know, the man unfortunately died. Ward's attorney said that this death was not intentional. I'm pretty sure if you back a truck up and go at him again, it's pretty intentional. He will be eligible for parole in 30 years. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below.
I actually have a story that involves a Nahual. It's people who can transform into their totem animal, whether it be a jaguar, a bear, a wolf. They don't fully transform into it, but they get the same characteristics as that animal. Obviously, a lot of people believe different things. Some people act like guides, good in a way, and other obviously use it for evil. They come out in the night because the energy shifts at night.
The moon is fucking probably beaming.
It's like the witch's hour, basically. Right?
Yeah.
My mom, she told me that almost every single night or every other night, there will always be this big black dog that would basically be outside just kind of patrolling, walking back and forth, trying to wait till somebody opens the door. Like I said, this one night, my mom's aunt, she woke up to some rustling outside of the house. Keep in mind, this is like in the Pueblo and shit.
Yeah, so it's dark as fuck out there.
Dark as fuck, and she realizes that it's right outside of the door. So she obviously decides to look out the window because she's not about to open it in the middle of the night. And she sees a big black dog just walking back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it was known that a Nahual was part of that like town and shit. And that like he would kidnap women and take them to a field, kill them in the beer.
Fuck.
Yeah, bro. Like a lot of people are gonna compare this to again Skinwalkers, kind of similar but completely different in a way. Let me know if you guys ever experienced or heard about anything like this, because I know there's a lot of people who have.
I saw a lot of people saying how like they know people who are.
This is Tragedy by the Sea, one of the most disturbing and sad photos of all time. Okay, so first glance at this photo, you just think it's a couple arguing at the beach, right? But believe it or not, this photo might have the most unsettling and disturbing backstory ever. On the morning of April 2nd, 1954, Los Angeles Times photographer named John Gaunt, who was pictured in the middle of this photo, was relaxing on his front yard of his beachfront house when he heard a neighbor shout, "Something's happening on the beach." He then instinctively grabbed his camera and rushed over to see the horrified couple clutching each other on the beach. On the shore stood a young couple named Mr. and Mrs. McDonald, and their body language made John's stomach turn. He realized that someone must be lost, and he then took a photograph from 200 yards away. Only then did he learn that just moments before, the couple's 19-month-old son Michael, who had been playing in the yard, had wandered down to the beach and crawled into the violent waters while they weren't looking. Despite the back and forth efforts by the parents, there was nothing they can do but just wait. Unfortunately, later that day, the child's dead body was washed up about a mile away on the beach. And this photo, titled "Tragedy by the Sea," appeared on the front page of the Times the very next day. John Gaunt then won the 1955 Pulitzer Prize Award, calling the photo poignant and profoundly moving. But he also received heavy criticism for capitalizing on the family's tragedy for his photo opportunity. But now take a look at this photo, knowing everything you do, and tell me it's not one of the saddest and most disturbing photos ever.
It's a very creepy video. Like when I show y'all gonna be like, what the fuck is this? So it's called Padre Oye Gritos en Misa.
El Señor esté con ustedes y con tu espíritu.
Fuck that, bro.
The priest didn't even react because he's probably like, nah, this is some demon shit trying to test me to stop mass or whatever.
I wouldn't go the paranormal route. Maybe it was the actual like woman like.
That
something.
sounded like a woman to you?
Yeah.
Like literally right after that, they ended up like cutting the mass short because they were like, yeah, let's stop this. Maybe they got scared. They probably thought it was like you said, somebody being crazy or something.
Yeah.
Maybe others thought it was some paranormal.
Imagine being in church and then you hear that.
I know we talked about it in the IE and Friends podcast. Churches are actually scary, which they shouldn't be scary, but at night they give like this little eerie feeling.
I think what it is because of scary movies that we've seen and how basically they play on the stuff that we feel most
These are the harrowing Google searches that proved a police officer killed this 16-year-old girl. Susana Morales was a sweet 16-year-old girl who lived in Norcross in Georgia. She was last seen by friends and family on the evening of the 26th of July 2022. It was very out of character for her to just disappear. She was reported missing to police, and it seemed as though she just vanished into thin air. No one could work out what on earth had happened to her. The night she went missing, she did send a text message to her mum at around 9:40 p.m. telling her she was on her way home. Investigators were able to determine from an app on her phone that she walked along a road in the direction of her house between 10:07 p.m. and 10:21 p.m. They figured she may have got into a car at this point. Her phone last pinged near Oak Lock Trace. Disturbingly, the phone was then switched off. Now, initial searches proved fruitless and the trail seemed to go cold until 6 months later. Her naked remains were discovered dumped in the woods at around 6:30 p.m. on the 6th of February by a traumatized member of the public. They rang police and reported that there was what appeared to be a body near State Route 316. 22-year-old Miles Bryant, a police officer at the time, was arrested shortly after the discovery. His gun was reportedly found near the victim's remains. His internet searches included how long does it take a body to decompose and how are you ID'd by dental records. Miles was found guilty of malice murder, felony murder, kidnapping and false report of a crime. He has now been given life in prison.
These are haunting pictures of people moments before their death. This is Roman Gonzalez, a Puerto Rican singer with a huge fan base. He had millions upon millions of listeners worldwide. Early in 2014, he was involved in a motorbike crash with another vehicle, resulting in his death at the age of 27. The picture you see on the screen right now was taken by Roman moments before the accident killed him. It's unknown whether this selfie was a factor in his death. But literally moments after this picture was taken, his life ended. He was just enjoying his day, not thinking about dying at all. It goes to show that you have to sit back and take everything in once in a while. Next up is a photo of Petra and Gary Slock. Now, this photo wouldn't be eerie at all if it wasn't taken on the doomed Malaysia Airlines flight MH17. This plane was allegedly shot down by pro-Russian separatists on July 17, 2014, leading to an ongoing international investigation. Everyone on board flight MH17 was killed in the attack. Gary Slock and his mother Petra Slock took this photo right before takeoff, making them among the victims of the tragedy. May they rest in peace. Next up is the last photo ever taken of Princess Diana. The death of Princess Diana might be one of the most controversial deaths in history because there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding her car crash and many people think it was a cover-up. And many others think she was killed by the high-ups in England. This photo was taken by one of the paparazzi photographers in front of the vehicle, only moments before the fatal crash. So, what do you think happened? This is Pavel Kashin, who was a freerunner. He would often perform jaw-dropping stunts with friends in dangerously high places. But unfortunately, Pavel made a fatal error during one of his sessions. This photo shows Pavel just moments after he lost his balance after landing a backflip off the wall. He then died after falling 16 stories. I would never understand parkour and free running for this exact reason, but people like to do what they like to do. May Pavel Kashin rest in peace.
Next, they took us to a computer lab where students were using the internet. And your first thought is, okay, this looks like any lab at a university back home. But then it dawns on you that it's completely silent. No one is doing anything.
I'm going to play you the rest of that clip at the end of this TikTok because it gets even weirder, but what's the internet like in North Korea? That was a question I was asking myself earlier, so I decided to research it and make this TikTok. So internet access is actually available in North Korea, but the catch is you're only allowed to access it with special authorization. In December 2014, it was reported that a little over 1,000 different IP addresses exist in all of North Korea, and the total number of internet users is only estimated to be in the low thousands. So keep in mind, for a population of 26 million people, only a few thousand of them use the internet. Now, obviously, people like Kim Jong-un and other government officials can use the internet whenever they like to, but if you're a citizen and you're allowed to use the internet, you get access to about 30 websites. Obviously, you're not going on Facebook or Google or any Western social media like that. And those websites, kind of like this one, are all propaganda. These websites are used to encourage hostile attitudes towards South Korea and other Western countries, and they obviously are used to show that their leader Kim Jong-un is a superhuman. Remember, according to the North Korean government, Kim Jong-un does not pee or poop. That is real. You can look that up. That is true. There's some strange things on those websites too. Like on one of the official websites, there's a cartoon of a US soldier being closely followed by 2 missiles. I mean, it's all just pure propaganda. So yeah, just watch the rest of this news clip. This is just some really weird, bizarre stuff.
Next, they took us to a computer lab where students were using the internet. And your first thought is, okay, this looks like any lab at a university back home. But then it dawns on you that it's completely silent. No one is doing anything. There was no typing, no mouse clicking, nothing. We saw one guy looking at the Google homepage, but he wasn't searching for anything. He was just staring blankly at the screen.
This is one of the hardest execution videos to watch explained. The video that I'm about to explain is a short one, but it's absolutely gut-turning. The video setting is in some sort of rainforest area, and as the video begins, Deborah Bessa, who is the victim on your screen right now, can be seen kneeling on the ground, and a man is standing behind her holding her hair. His face is covered and he's holding a machete. The look on Deborah's face is complete fear and worry as she awaits her grisly demise. She is then pulled to the ground by the guy with the machete and lets out a haunting scream. Deborah is lying on her side, almost in a fetal position now, and the killer then takes the machete and tries to slash the side of her neck with it, but struggles as Deborah tries her best to defend herself, while letting out ear-piercing screams. A second man then enters the shot carrying what looks like a kitchen knife, and he then begins to stab Deborah in her side and around her ribcage area. She reacts with a short, sharp scream and then lies on her back after she is stabbed. The man with the machete then begins slashing at her throat as Deborah screams and screams and screams. And while this is happening, the man with the kitchen knife begins stabbing her in the stomach. And instinctively, she tries to move her hand to protect herself from the stabbings, but the killer stabs through her hand and into her stomach. After a few seconds, she stops screaming but is still moving as she is being stabbed and beheaded by the killers. The man with the machete then stands up and hits Deborah in the throat with the machete, which makes a cracking type sound, which means he most likely hit her spine with the blade. He then hits her again and again, and after the second strike, it appears Deborah vomits, but it comes out of her slashed throat instead of her mouth. He then hits her a couple more times and her body freezes up as her spinal cord is severed, and it appears the beheading has been completed and the video concludes. 2 of the 3 killers in this video have been arrested and this video was used as evidence. This video is absolutely horrific and some consider it one of the worst ones out there, and I can see why. Just the pure evil and brutality in this video is enough to make you look away. Never go searching for this video because you will regret it immediately.
Let's talk about how in the past 2 years, 12 bodies have mysteriously been found in an Austin, Texas lake. Locals believe a serial killer named the Rainy Street Ripper is responsible, and this man believes that he was targeted and drugged but survived to tell the story. Since 2022, 12 bodies have been found in Lady Bird Lake, which is a portion of the Colorado River that runs directly through downtown Austin. All of the bodies found were of men in or around their 30s, all of which were out drinking on nearby Rainy Street, which is a really popular street littered with bars and restaurants. So far, in just 2024, 3 bodies were found, all of which are still unidentified. I'll go more into detail about all of the victims later, but this is Jeff Jones. On June 23rd of last year, Jeff was visiting Austin for a bachelor party with 12 of his closest friends. The night started off with them going to dinner at the Iron Cactus and then to the Rustic Tap. At some point, Jeff blacked out, which is odd because he's 6'3" and can handle his alcohol, and that night in particular, he wasn't even drinking that much. At around 1:30 in the morning, Jeff became separated from his friends, and not long after, his phone went dead and all communication stopped. Then at around 4 a.m., an anonymous 911 call came in from someone who saw Jeff lying unconscious at the bottom of the historic West 6th Street Bridge. The bridge overlooks a creek which flows into Lady Bird Lake, and it's about a 25-foot drop. So Jeff was rushed to the hospital where he underwent emergency surgery on his kidneys, his liver, and his lung, and he also had to have his spleen removed. He broke 7 vertebrae, his shoulder, and 2 of his ribs. He woke up in the hospital with metal rods holding his back together more than 2 weeks later with no recollection of what happened. Authorities found that he tested positive for benzodiazepine, a sedative family that includes Rohypnol, which is commonly known as the date rape drug. Nobody, not even Jeff himself, knows what happened that night, as 3 hours are completely unaccounted for. But he believes that he was targeted, drugged, and possibly pushed off the bridge that night. He fell within 5 feet of the water, and had he actually landed in the water, he would have drowned and floated off without anyone knowing. According to locals, that bridge specifically has a high railing, which would make it incredibly difficult to just fall over, drunk or not. And adding to the mystery is the fact that Jeff was found in the exact same spot as Randy Lexfold, except Randy sadly died. Randy was also visiting the area from out of town, just like Jeff, but he was found in 2019. Since 2022, 12 other bodies would be pulled from Lady Bird Lake under suspicious circumstances. But I want to start off with the mysterious death of Riyad Hamad, which occurred long before anyone else. On April 15, 2008, Riyad's body was pulled from the lake. His hands and feet were bound, and his entire face was wrapped in duct tape, yet the Austin Police Department ruled his death a suicide. In November of 2018, Martin Gutierrez had dinner with his brother and then went to a bar on Rainey Street. According to his brother, Martin's behavior got more unusual and belligerent as the night went on, which is weird considering Martin wasn't drinking that much. The last time Martin was ever seen was on security footage walking towards the lake, and then he vanished. His body would be found 8 days later in Lady Bird Lake. Austin PD ruled his death as an accidental drowning, but what's odd is that Martin had an unexplained contusion on the back of his head. These are the rest of the victims who were found in the lake, starting with Ricky Parks, who was found in July of 2022. Authorities believe he likely drowned. The next is Christopher Gutierrez, found in December of 2022, along with Kyle Thornton and Jose Moreno. All of their deaths were deemed not suspicious with the exception of Jose, who was shot while he was driving and drove into the lake. The next victim is Jason John, who was found on February 13th, 2023. He was last seen on Rainey Street a week earlier, and according to his mom, he didn't know how to swim and purposely never went near the water because of this. She doesn't believe this was an accident. The next is Clifton Axtell, who was found on March 5th, 2023. He went missing a week prior near Stubbs, which is a barbecue restaurant near Rainey Street. His death was ruled undetermined. Then we have Christopher Hayes Clark and Jonathan Honey. Both were found in the lake in April of last year. Jonathan was last seen at a food truck on Rainey Street just 1 day prior. The last body pulled from the lake in 2023 was Moga Dogel, and I'm hoping that I'm pronouncing that correctly. His cause of death was also undetermined. 3 more bodies have been pulled from the lake just this year, and while they're all still unidentified, authorities aren't investigating them as homicides. Austin police are denying any rumors of a possible serial killer, and they say that all of these deaths are either undetermined, suicides, or accidental drowning since the lake is so close to the nightlife on Rainey Street. The city of Austin plans to increase safety measures like adding more lighting, fencing, and security cameras in the area. And while all of this would be extremely helpful, locals can't help but feel like a serial killer is on the loose targeting these men. And they've even named this possible killer as the Rainey Street Ripper. Regardless of what's going on, this area is obviously really dangerous, so please just keep your eyes open and stay safe.
This disturbing Venezuelan video is absolutely awful, and whatever you do, don't go searching for it. In January of 2018, a gruesome video went viral in Venezuela and Latin America. Many people claim this video came from the Middle East or India, but it indeed did come from Venezuela. This clip highlights the issue of forced labor and people trafficking in Venezuela, as many who work in the illegal mines tend to be migrants. The victim in this video has still yet to be identified and more than likely never will. What is known is that the victim was from Guyana and arrived in Venezuela to work the illegal mines. Why he was murdered is up to debate, but according to some reports, the victim was stealing or being in cahoots with people he shouldn't have been with, and this could possibly be why he was murdered. In one article, it says the victim's murder was ordered by a farmer named Tilson. Allegedly, he ordered the murder to send a message to his workers who stole from him. This seems to be the reason for the killing, as in the video you hear a man talking, accusing the victim of being a thief. The video is 2 minutes and 16 seconds long and is extremely hard to watch. Whatever you do, never go searching for it. In the first 15 seconds of the video, the person filming, who may be the farmer previously mentioned, roughly states, "This is a message to all of those who want to rob from my farm. I am the greatest in Venezuela." All while the statement is being read, the camera is fixated on the victim's face. The victim is lying on the ground on his back and is gagged with his hands tied. The victim looks young and, if I had to guess, is either in his late teens or early 20s. As he lays there waiting for his fate, the fear in his eyes says 1,000 words. After the statement is read, the brutality begins. A man then enters shot who has his face covered and is carrying some sort of knife. He bends down next to the victim and begins slicing off his right ear. The victim makes no noise, but he scrunches up his face and closes his eyes as he absorbs the pain. The gang member then moves over to the victim's left ear and slices it off. Once both ears are cut off, the victim lets out painful sighs. The killer then appears to hand the knife over to the person filming, and in a POV type of shot, you see the person filming waving the knife around while accusing him of being a thief, while saying, "This is what would happen to anyone who steals from me." The victim tries to plead his case and his voice cracks and breaks several times. You literally hear the fear in his voice. A man then enters shot who is the same man who cut off the victim's ears, but this time he is carrying a machete. The killer then takes the machete and slams the blade down against the victim's throat, hitting his Adam's apple area. Blood erupts from his neck, shooting up in the air, and you begin to hear the sound of gurgling blood. The victim instinctively sits up and blood pours out like a river. In a matter of seconds, his entire chest is covered red in blood. It looks like you kind of poured a bucket of red paint all over him. The noises you hear at this point are like squeals, and it's honestly horrific. The killer then takes the machete and slams the blade twice onto the back of the victim's neck, and the noises become even more horrific. The killer with the machete then takes the blade and strikes the victim several more times on the back of his neck, and at this point the victim appears to pass out or pass away. The amount of blood in this video is insane, and the quality of the video is actually good, making it even worse to watch. Because as we know, in most of these videos, the quality is pretty bad. The video then concludes as the victim is lying in a pool of his own blood, half decapitated. The fear in the victim's eyes really stick with you, and it's just sad. And what makes the video even worse is the fact that the victim is extremely young, maybe between the ages of 15 and 21. This is just another example of the disturbing world we live in, and this is just awful.
Hammer coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Woman cut her cheating husband's off twice. It was 2015 in Shangyu, China. Fan Lung was a father of 5. The 32-year-old was married to his wife, 30-year-old Feng Lung. However, he was secretly messaging another woman. This was 21-year-old Zhang Heng. Bizarrely, he used his wife's phone to do this. On one occasion, though, he forgot to log out of his account when he gave his wife the phone back. This enabled her to see an explicit message that he'd sent to the other woman. When she saw this, she flew into a rage. She burst into the bedroom where he lay sleeping and cut his penis off with scissors. He was rushed to hospital where surgeons managed to perform surgery to reattach his organ. However, the wife then snuck into the hospital room and cut it off again. After hacking it off a second time, she threw it out of the window. Shocking images showed him naked running outside chasing his wife. Blood was running down his leg as he struck her. Medical staff raced outside. However, doctors unfortunately couldn't find his missing body part this time. It was thought that maybe a wild animal had taken it. His 21-year-old lover actually came to visit him in the hospital. Despite him losing the organ, she stated that she planned to marry him as soon as possible. A dismembered human body has washed up on a beach in New York. On Friday the 17th of November, the New York Police Department got a disturbing phone call just before 12:30. They arrived at Breezy Point Beach to discover a human torso with legs attached but no head or arms. The unidentified body has been sent to the medical examiner to try and determine the cause of death. However, obviously the fact that the body has been dismembered and also that the body was in water is going to make this incredibly hard. The identity of the person has not yet been released to the public, and it's not yet clear whether the police even know this information. The discovery comes weeks after Emmy Award-winning Ross MacDonald from Dublin vanished. He disappeared on the 4th of November after riding his bike in roughly the same area. His bike was found at Fort Tilden Beach near Roxbury, which is a popular swimming location. It's just 3 miles away from Breezy Point Beach.
I turned 29 little girls into life-size dolls. I am Anatoly Moskvin, a recognized Russian historian. I dedicated my life to studying history, but I had a dark and unhealthy obsession. I was fascinated My cemeteries are funeral rituals and death. I began visiting cemeteries, exhuming the bodies of young girls and bringing them back to my home. I spent entire days dressing them, applying makeup, and maintaining them. To me, they weren't dead. They were just asleep. My house became a macabre mausoleum filled with these life-size dolls. Every day I would talk to them, sing lullabies to them, and even organize birthday parties. It was my way of giving them a second life. But in 2011, the police uncovered my dark secret. 29 dolls, each formed from the remains of a young girl, were discovered in my residence. I was apprehended and convicted of desecration of graves. I am Anatoly Moskvin, the historian who turned the dead into dolls.
You may know the story of Lizzie Borden, who was arrested for the axe murder of her father and stepmother. But did you know there was another axe murder that happened around the time as the one that Lizzie was being tried for? And it completely changed the Lizzie Borden trial. On August 4th, 1892, Lizzie Borden's father and stepmother were found hacked to death with an axe inside of her home. Lizzie was home when this occurred, and at one point she went upstairs and walked past the guest bedroom, which held the mangled body of her stepmother, but she claimed that she saw nothing the entire day. It sounded really suspicious, and many people thought she committed the crime, but there was no physical evidence in the house that really tied her to it. What a lot of people don't know, though, is that that spring there was another axe murder in Lizzie's town. Bertha Manchester, a farmer's daughter, was found with 23 axe wounds to the head. The sketch artist did her so dirty. But this crime was committed by a man, a farmhand who had a wage dispute with her father. And to get revenge, he killed Bertha. This led a lot of people in the community to believe that only a rage-filled man could have committed a crime like this. And Lizzie was a very mild-mannered woman. Could this have contributed to why she was acquitted? So I had no idea how common it was to actually see supernatural beings during car wrecks, but so many of you guys had crazy stories. It reminds me of this story from 9/11 about the last guy that made it out of the South Tower who was led out by a person that wasn't there. But before we get into it, if you're interested in these kinds of stories, I just did a whole podcast episode about them. So Ron DeFrancesco was on the 84th floor of the South Tower, right in this area on 9/11. He survived the impact, but he runs to a stairwell because he knows he has to get out of the building. But when he opens up the stairwell, people are running up, not down. So he starts going up, but he gets a feeling that they're not going to make it out if they go up. So around floor 91, he turns around and he starts heading down. But in the stairwell, there's smoke and debris and fire everywhere. And also there's just people passed out all around him. So he thinks he's about to die when all of a sudden he hears his voice go, "Get up, keep going." He kind of thinks at first it's a fireman, but no rescue teams had made it up that high just yet. So he gets up and he starts going down, and this voice is pointing out where the debris and the fire is, making sure that he's safe the whole way. And then once he's in the clear, it just disappears. Ron was the last person to make it out of the tower, and he fully credits this supernatural being.
I killed 3 of my friends, whom I turned into biscuits and soap that I gave to those around me. I am Leonardo Cianciulli, born on November 14th, 1893, in Montella, Italy, and I am nicknamed the Soap Maker of Correggio. My eldest son, Giuseppe, was called for military service during World War II, and I was extremely afraid for his safety. In order to protect my son, I performed rituals and sacrifices, believing that it could safeguard him and prevent him from being killed. To attract my victims, I invited them for tea. That's how I killed my first victim, Faustina Setti. I poisoned a glass of wine that I gave her, then used a hatchet to cut her body into several pieces, which I used to make soap sold in my shop. For the other 2 victims, I brought them to my home, making them believe I was going to find them a husband, and then simply poisoned their tea. I then used the blood of my victims to make delicious biscuits that I gave to my neighbors and friends. The sister of my last victim began to worry about her disappearance, and the police then knocked on my door to question me. At that time, I was wearing the ring of the last victim, and that's how my sinister secret was discovered. I was then sentenced to 30 years in prison and 3 years in a psychiatric institution. I served only 24 years before succumbing to a stroke in 1970.
My father's hands, driven by primal rage, reached for Larry Nassar in that courtroom, the man who grievously violated me. I'm Emma Ann Miller, standing with a legion of survivors against the doctor who turned trust into terror. But more on that courtroom scene in a moment. Nassar's abuse was systematic, calculated predation under the guise of medical treatment. He targeted young gymnasts, myself included, using his authority to perform invasive procedures that were entirely unnecessary and deeply traumatic. These acts were not just betrayals of trust, they were deliberate, repeated assaults on our bodies and minds. Now, back to that courtroom. My father's attempt to attack Nassar was not just an act of raw emotion. It was an eruption of the accumulated pain and betrayal felt by so many. Nassar's subsequent sentencing to up to 175 years marked a pivotal moment of justice. It was more than a legal verdict. It was a declaration that our voices mattered, that our pain was acknowledged, and that even those in positions of power are not above the law. Our story, marked by anguish and bravery, continues to echo as a fierce reminder of the resilience of survivors and the relentless pursuit of justice.
To grant me 5 minutes in a locked room with this demon.
These are videos humans were never meant to see. Okay, so the video you're about to see shows a skier going down a mountain when suddenly a bear starts chasing her. And I mean starts chasing her to kill her. And the entire time she doesn't see the bear or realize it's chasing her because she's listening to Work by Rihanna. She was seconds away from death. Here's the video. These are pictures with the most disturbing backstories, part 6. This picture is from a video on the dark web called Blank Man Soup, and this picture has an insanely disturbing backstory. This man is being held hostage by these two individuals in super weird Ray Ray costumes, and the man is eating soup also, but it's not soup at all. It is actually the human remains of his dead wife and children that he is being forced to eat. And what makes this even more sad is that the man is crying hysterically because he knows he's about to die. Now, I'm about to show you the video, but be warned, it's extremely disturbing.
When this girl and her stepdad vanished from their house, no one could have predicted what was about to happen next. Sydney Randall was 14 years old from Arkansas. On the evening of the 9th of March 2013, her mum Denise noticed that she was missing, along with her stepdad. Her stepdad was Denise's husband John, and they had both seemingly vanished. Now Denise was relieved when John returned home in the early hours of the morning, but worryingly he wasn't with Sydney. Denise told him about her concerns and the fact that her daughter was missing, and John left the house again saying he was going to file a missing persons report. However, time went on with no news and John didn't return, so Denise decided to ring police herself. A huge search began for the missing girl and her now missing stepdad. That was until days later when John's body was discovered. He was found deceased in a field on the side of the road from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. John was deemed likely to be involved in Sydney's disappearance at this point, and eventually Denise agreed. Search teams were out in force to find the missing girl, but no luck. Weeks and months passed until eventually in May 2013 a body was discovered. Sydney was tragically found deceased in the Black River near the Lawrence and Randolph County lines. A medical examiner concluded that she died from blunt force trauma. DNA was found under her fingernails and this was determined to be that of John's DNA. Denise was understandably devastated by this news. She had believed that Sydney and John had a normal relationship. She couldn't have been more wrong. Sydney's dad at this point came forward to say that he had suspected that John was SAing his daughter. Sydney's friends also confirmed that Sydney had told them she was afraid of her stepdad. It's believed that he killed Sydney so that she wouldn't come forward and expose him for the abuse.
This is the story of Lacey Peterson and her unborn son Connor. Lacey Denise Rosher was born on the 4th of May 1975 in California to parents Sharon and Dennis. She had an older brother called Brent who'd been born in 1971. Lacey was a fun-loving child who worked on the family's dairy farm from a very young age and loved gardening with her mother. When Lacey was very young, her parents divorced and her mother remarried a man named Ron Gransky, who helped raise Lacey and Brent from the time Lacey was 2 years old. Lacey graduated from Thomas Downey High School and then attended university where she majored in ornamental horticulture. In 1994, Lacey was visiting a friend who worked at a cafe in Morro Bay. This is where she met Scott Peterson. They very quickly started a relationship and Lacey told her mother that she'd met the man she was going to marry. The couple dated for 2 years before moving in together. While Scott finished his senior year, Lacey took up a job alongside her studies. Lacey married Scott on August 9, 1997, and they soon moved back to Lacey's hometown to start a family. They bought a house together and in 2002, Lacey fell pregnant. Her due date was February 10, 2003, and they planned to name their son Connor. On Christmas Eve 2002, Scott left to go on a fishing trip at Barkley Marina. He said he'd last seen Lacey cooking and cleaning and that she was planning to walk the family dog, Mackenzie. Later that day, Mackenzie was found alone wandering the streets by a neighbour. She placed him in the Petersons' backyard. Scott returned home to find Mackenzie in the backyard, but the house empty. He washed his clothes and showered, stating that he got wet during his fishing trip. That evening, Lacey's mother received a phone call from Scott, asking if she'd seen Lacey. This was the first time that she learned that Lacey was missing. It was completely out of character. So Lacey's stepdad Ron called the police and reported her missing. When police arrived at Lacey and Scott's home, they searched her belongings and found that her keys, wallet and sunglasses were in her purse and placed inside a closet. Scott was questioned that evening and he came across to officers as very calm and cool, even a little arrogant. He definitely didn't seem like someone who was crushed or even greatly disturbed by his wife's disappearance and possible death.
This Netflix star is a hardcore convicted pedophile, and this story is truly disturbing. So meet Jerry Harris. He was a star on the Netflix show Cheer. He's a famous cheerleader. And back when this show came out in 2020, he was all over. He was on the Ellen DeGeneres show. He was on various cheerleading programs. And yeah, he was one of the stars of the show Cheer. So the show Cheer actually followed a cheerleading team from Texas. And the show focused on the behind the scenes of cheerleading competitions, you know, what goes into it, all of the interactions between cheerleaders and the coaches. So when everybody first saw Jerry Harris on the show Cheer, they loved him. He was super over the top. He was always making people laugh. And Ellen DeGeneres even named him as her future Oscars correspondent. But then came the allegations in 2020. So a few months after the show debuted on Netflix, the FBI announced that they had a warrant for Jerry Harris's arrest. He had allegedly been seeking out relationships with minors, if you know what I'm talking about. Apparently, this entire thing was started by two twin brothers who were 13 years old when Jerry Harris was 19. And Jerry had been using Snapchat to try contact these young 13-year-old twin brothers and was asking for photos, videos, and to meet up. And once the FBI made this announcement, all sorts of messages started popping up that Jerry had sent minors on the internet, and they were really, really disturbing. And apparently Jerry's behavior wasn't only exclusive to the internet. He had actually met with minors in person and had contact with them, multiple minors. And I mean, you could actually look up these screenshots on the internet, and they are really disturbing what he was saying to literal children. So in September of 2020, Jerry Harris was arrested in Chicago and charged with the production of CP, and eventually he would face an additional 7 other charges. Now, he apparently had the 2 male victims that he targeted at the beginning, and then 4 other victims came forward. And they claimed that, yeah, he had done stuff in person with them, he had solicited things online. This Jerry guy was a true creep. And just last year, in 2022, Jerry Harris finally pled guilty to these charges, admitting that he had done this, and he was sentenced to 12 years in prison. And hopefully, because that sentence is not too long, he will learn something while he's in there. Otherwise, in about a decade, he'll be out on the streets again.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
These are videos humans were never meant to see. Okay, so we all know how terrifying and disturbing the Paris catacombs are. But if you don't know what the Paris catacombs are, I'll explain it to you real quick. In the late 18th century, major public health problems were tied to the city's cemeteries, so they started moving all the bodies underground. And it's the final resting place for about 6 million people. But the video I'm about to show you shows a guy that went very deep into the catacombs and got lost. And he just didn't get lost, he is still missing today. This video feels like its own horror movie, so here it is.
It's a point of view shot. The point of view shot is somebody just walking forwards with the camera. So basically he's filming what he's seeing very deep inside the catacombs. Other than the point of view shots are pictures of bones. Human bones. Occasionally he stops and he photographs bone, often in the shape of an arrow. These arrows point in a direction. Occasionally also he stops to photograph roomfuls of bones, which means that he's very, very deep inside the catacombs. What happened to him? Nobody knows. There are ways to match things up, to try to identify where this person was in the catacombs. At times you'll see there's signs, painted signs on the wall, which is not uncommon. People have been painting in the catacombs for centuries. So it is possible with these paintings that we may be able to retrace an itinerary to some extent. After about 40 minutes of these point of view shots and these pictures of bones, the person begins to walk faster and faster. Then he begins to run. We hear his breathing get louder and louder, as though something was scaring him. He's frightened. Occasionally he stops, perhaps to try to decide which way to run among all the many different corridors. He's running faster and faster and faster, deeper and deeper into the catacombs. And all of a sudden, he drops the camera. He just dropped. The camera just drops on the ground and keeps rolling. And you see his feet just run away. And it keeps rolling until it runs out of tape.
This is the story of Elizabeth Fritzl and her 24-year imprisonment at the hands of her own father. Elizabeth was born on April 16, 1966, to parents Joseph and Rosemary. The couple had 6 other children, but for some reason Joseph decided to target Elizabeth and began abusing her at just 11 years old. At 15 years old, Elizabeth managed to run away from home and took refuge with a friend in Vienna. Unfortunately, the police found her, and just 3 weeks later, she was returned home to her parents. Over the next few years, Joseph hatched a plan to make sure Elizabeth never escaped him again. On August 28, 1984, 18-year-old Elizabeth was lured into the basement by her father, saying that he needed help to fit a door. In reality, he'd been converting the family basement into a makeshift prison chamber, and the door was the last thing he needed to seal it. Elizabeth was unknowingly helping her father to seal the chamber in which she would spend the next 24 years of her life. When Elizabeth's mother, Rosemary, realised she hadn't come home, she reported her missing to the police. A month later, Joseph walked into the police station and handed them a letter. It stated that Elizabeth was absolutely fine and said she was living with a friend. In actual reality, she'd been forced to write the letter, which is one of many that she would be forced to write over the years. Joseph told police that she'd most likely run away and joined a cult. Unfortunately, they bought his story and stopped looking. Joseph visited Elizabeth in the basement almost every day, and over the years she became pregnant a total of 6 times at the hands of her father and abuser. She gave birth in the basement a total of 6 times. One of those pregnancies was a twin pregnancy, and unfortunately one of the twins passed away at birth and was cremated by Joseph himself. One daughter and 2 sons, Kirsten, Stefan and Felix, stayed in the basement with Elizabeth, while the other 3 children, Lisa, Monica and Alexander, were taken upstairs to live in the house with Joseph and Rosemarie. Joseph and Rosemarie had regular visits from social workers. They told them that their 3 grandchildren had been left on the doorstep, and the couple were deemed suitable foster parents. Joseph decided, now that there were 4 people living in the basement, that it should be extended, and he put Elizabeth and her children to work straight away. They were digging soil out of the ground with their bare hands for hours on end every single day. They were given a fridge to store the food that Joseph gave them, and a hot plate to cook it on, and they were threatened with being gassed or electrocuted if they dared to try and escape. On April 19, 2008, Elizabeth's daughter Kirsten, now aged 19, fell seriously ill with kidney failure. Joseph agreed to seek medical attention and had her taken to hospital. Doctors soon realised that Kirsten had kidney failure due to lack of vitamin D. Little did they know that the first time Kirsten had seen daylight was when she was put into the ambulance. Please follow and I'll be back for part 2.
They found the skeletons of giant red-haired cannibals in this cave in Nevada. This story is stranger than fiction, so buckle up, I'm about to blow your mind. So this is the Lovelock Cave just outside of Lovelock, Nevada. And according to the oral history from the Paiute tribe that inhabited the lands, this cave was the home of the Siteka, or cannibalistic red-haired giants. So according to the history from local indigenous tribes, these cannibalistic red-haired giants would come out from this cave, eat each other, eat local indigenous tribal members, and the local tribal members became sick of these giants, so they started a war with them, and eventually they burned them out of the cave by setting fires inside of the cave and killing the giants. That is why, according to them, you can see burn marks on the top of the cave. So this might seem like a sort of far-fetched tale, but it's rooted in historical fact and even archaeological findings. So 1911, a group of guano or bat poop miners is there in the cave excavating through the guano, and they discover something strange. Right there in the cave, they begin to unearth human remains, hundreds and hundreds of bones, lots of pottery, arrowheads, all sorts of artifacts, and according to them, they even find the skeletons of these giants. According to these miners, the giant skeletons that they found were over 6 foot 6 inches tall. There were loads of them, they were full skeletons, and they excavated them and brought them down to the locals. Some people who had seen the skeletons even claimed that they were over 8 feet tall. But since they are no longer visible to the public, we'll never know the truth behind the giants. But what happened to these skeletons? Well, they were apparently on display for a number of years. Lots of people came and saw them. They were written about in newspapers. And there's even still a giant handprint inside of the cave that to this day people attribute to being left by the giants. Locals, though, don't know exactly what happened to the skeletons of these so-called giants. According to some articles that I read, the Smithsonian Institution came and took them and put them somewhere. But I still can't find any information as to what exactly happened. It is documented, though, that people did discover these giant skeletons. So the Lovelock Cave is shrouded in mystery. I had even talked to somebody who lived near the cave that claimed to have seen a skinwalker-type creature near the entrance of the cave. And yeah, remember, like I said, there was allegedly a massacre of cannibalistic giants in there. There were hundreds of bones and human remains that were discovered inside of the cave. So needless to say, this place is extremely haunted. I actually visited the cave late at night and filmed an entire paranormal investigation inside of there, and it was one of the craziest nights of filming and investigating that I personally have ever experienced. If you want to watch the full video, it's on my YouTube channel now. The link is in my bio. But yeah, if you want your mind blown, we dived really deep into the history of skinwalkers, of these red-haired cannibalistic giants. I tried to figure out exactly what happened to the skeletons that were found in Lovelock Cave, and wow, it is one hell of a documentary. Like I said, if you want to watch it, the link is in my TikTok bio.
Killer accidentally admitted to his crimes by accident when he forgot he was wearing a microphone while taking part in a documentary. This is how a true crime documentary exposed a killer. In 1971, Robert Durst met Kathleen McCormack and they got married. At the time of her disappearance in 1982, Kathleen had nearly graduated college. She was last seen by a witness at a dinner party where she appeared to be upset. She got a call from Robert and left. Robert admitted to having argued with Kathleen that night, but he said he put her on a train to New York and then never saw her again. Her friend called police to report her missing. Interestingly, Kathleen had been treated at a medical centre for facial bruises weeks prior to this and told the friend that Robert had done it. Robert had actually been dating someone else for some time prior to this and had been living separately to Kathleen. When her family broke into her cottage to try and find out where she was, they found the place had been trashed and her possessions put in the bin. Kathleen's family always believed that Robert was involved in her disappearance. In 2000, Susan Berman, a friend of Robert's, was found murdered. Now, she'd actually provided Robert with an alibi for Kathleen's disappearance. Now, pay really close attention to this next bit. Days after she was killed, a letter addressed to the Beverly Hills Police Department contained Susan's address and the word cadaver on it. On the envelope, Beverly was misspelled. Robert admitted in 2005 that Susan had called him shortly before her death to say that the police wanted to question her about Kathleen going missing. It's believed that Robert killed Susan to keep her quiet. In 2001, Robert's neighbour's body parts were found floating in Galveston Bay. Robert's elderly neighbour, Morris Black, had been killed and Robert was arrested. He was actually released on bail and fled and was found about a month later in Pennsylvania. He was found with $37,000 cash, 2 weapons, and interestingly, Morris Black's driving license. In court, Robert claimed he was acting in self-defense. He said he'd accidentally shot Morris and dismembered his body. Due to lack of forensics, he only got 5 years in jail. This is where things get really crazy. HBO was filming a documentary called The Jinx. During production, Susan's stepson found a letter written by Robert. This contained the same spelling error in the word Beverly as the anonymous letter to police. This implicated Robert in the murder. Now, while filming the documentary, Robert needed the toilet. He forgot that he had a microphone still attached to him. He was recorded talking to himself. He said, "There it is, you're caught. You're right, of course, but you can't imagine. Arrest him." And then he said, "What a disaster. He was right. I was wrong." And finally he said, "I'm having difficulty with the question. What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course." There has been an absolutely horrific murder this week that was live streamed on Instagram. This case is extremely disturbing, so please be warned before watching. On Friday, 12,000 people watched a Bosnian bodybuilder kill his wife on Instagram Live. 35-year-old Nermin had been abusing his wife during their marriage and the pair had a young child. On Friday morning, he took to Instagram Live to tell his followers that they could witness a live killing. Absolutely horrifically, he turns the camera to his ex, whose face is completely covered in blood and disfigured. He calls her a derogatory name and blames her for her own death because she reported him to police. Disturbingly, you can hear the child crying in the background. He then tells his followers that he's the child's father and his ex had hidden the toddler from him for over a week and reported him to police for DV. So, in my opinion, yes, she's taking steps to keep her and her child safe from you. After shooting his wife in the head on Instagram, he then goads his followers saying, "Someone come and save the child." A police chase then began and he went on a shooting rampage. He continued to film and tells his viewers that he's killed 2 other people who actually turned out to be an innocent man and his young son. He also wounded a police officer, another man and a woman while on the run. He ended up unaliving himself on the same day. This is one of the most horrific cases I've heard recently, so please be warned before watching. 29-year-old Taylor Parker has just been sentenced to death for a crime so horrendous that I can't believe a human is capable of this. Regan Simmons Hancock and Taylor had met online. Their online friendship soon blossomed into a real-life connection. It was 2022 and Regan was married with a young daughter. She was also 8 months pregnant at this time. Taylor was also pregnant, or so it would seem to the outside world. She was posting pregnancy pictures on social media and even hosted a gender reveal party. Little did her loved ones know that she was actually staging the entire thing. Regan and Taylor were really good friends around this time and they were bonding over their pregnancies. Regan even shared a Facebook status thanking Taylor for bringing her round a gift and Starbucks. This was the day before she would be murdered by Taylor. On Taylor's supposed due date, she made her way round to Regan's house in Texas. Shortly after, Regan's mum made a horrifying discovery. Her daughter was face down on the floor, deceased, with blood everywhere. Her mum rang the emergency services and they raced to the scene. It became apparent that her baby had been, and again a massive trigger warning here, ripped out of her stomach, and Regan had been stabbed over 100 times. Meanwhile, Taylor was pulled over for speeding and driving erratically. She'd actually put the baby in her lap with the umbilical cord coming out of her trousers to make it seem like she'd just given birth. When the pair were taken to hospital, the horrors of what actually happened became apparent. The newborn baby tragically passed away and Taylor was arrested. She was sentenced to death, but her defense lawyer said that her loved ones should have done more to protect her earlier on when she was pretending to be pregnant.